if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background and what you do and how you want to help people, what you're passionate about, any of that, open floor.
Okay, great. I am Hannah Loomis. I'm the founder and owner of Inner Monkeys Multimedia Content Creation. And I have a long background at this point in graphic design, um, video, doing both the filming and editing, as well as animation, and some photography as well. And I'm a musician, so that's really my background. And I find it actually comes into play a lot when I'm looking for music for videos. It is quite helpful. Um, and I love in particular helping small businesses and organizations communicate through visual media, um, sort of who they are, what they're doing, what they need, kind of anything. It's just a lot of fun for me to collaborate. And I thought today it would be interesting to go through some tips I have about using your phone for video. I mean, I'm a videographer, so of course I like people to hire me for doing video, but um, it's certainly not always possible for everyone. But video has become really important. It's one of the main ways that people learn about businesses and organizations at this point. So having decent video can be really helpful. And there are some relatively easy things you can do um, to just improve what you're probably already doing. I have not made this comprehensive. In other words, I use an iPhone. That's what you're going to see is like how I edit on an iPhone. But I know there are tons of different apps and tools if you don't happen to have an iPhone, so I'm not an expert or a resource on what kinds of tools you can find for Android or whatever, but they're out there. So I'm just going to take you through some things. So I will share my screen and we'll go through this presentation, and please interrupt anytime. This is for you. So I want you to ask questions. Uh, okay. Alrighty. So quick tips for taking great videos with your phone. I'm going to go through a series of very brief, like sort of common mistakes and then things you can do to correct those. So here's one thing I often find. Mistake number one is shooting into the light. And what I mean by that is if you and or your camera is in a dark place pointed towards light, it's likely to that any of the bright spaces will be overexposed. The dark spaces where you are will lack any detail. They'll look grainy. You may have noticed, like if you take a photo and you kind of zoom in on it, it just looks very weird. It's sort of patchy and there's a lot of noise in it. And one of the reasons could be because you don't have the right light on it. And so one easy thing to do is just not shoot into the light. It could also have to do with how large, like what kind of resolution you've chosen on your phone. So I have my phone set to automatically shoot in 4K. And if you find that you need to step in and take some video for maybe an event or do an interview with someone, anything like that, um, choose the highest setting that you possibly can, the highest quality, because it really will make a difference. And also, something I didn't happen to mention here, but I really should have in the presentation is if you need to do that, if at all possible, have some sort of tripod. Like it could be those little cheap, gorilla things that just sit but especially if you need to hold steady on the same shot for a while. Make sure it's stabilized because shaking is something that it's really hard to correct. Okay, but mistake number one, shooting into the light. So here's, oh, sorry, there we go. Solution number one, shoot with the light behind you and on the object or the subject that you want to film. And I will say these aren't really fantastic videos. I did this quickly in the museum one day, but you can see, I think, that the subject here, instead of the background, is much easier to, I mean, instead of the what's through it, is much easier to see. The colors are more natural, there'll just be more detail, and it will look all around better. Mistake number two. Take a look at this, and you can see my hands and the phone and all kinds of strange reflections and strange shadows. I happen to think it looks kind of neat, but you mostly probably don't want that. So it's just something to notice. Like, what are you capturing in the shot when you're filming? This happens all the time where someone's filming and they are in a mirror. Like they don't realize that they are, or they're being reflected in glass. So they're showing up in the shot when they should be anonymous. So, and not in there. So just things to watch out for um, that you want to try to stay out of the shot yourself. And also in this case with the, back with the light overhead, like I mentioned, it's just confusing to look at and yeah, disorienting. Are there any questions so far? Because I'm just, nope.
No, no, all good.
Okay. You guys please pipe up at any
Yeah.
point. There's nothing formal about this. Um, okay. So there, again, there you can see my hands. So the solution to this is just don't do it. So mistake number three, and this maybe isn't a mistake exactly, but it's something to really consider when you're filming. Like these are basically ways to make what could be an okay film really interesting. So here, the object is a very cool object, but we're looking at it head on, and it never changes. I don't know if you saw the video run for some. Oh, here we go. So it's a cool thing to look at, but there's no surprise. There's no variety. As opposed to this, where it's kind of all surprise and variety. And there are times when you do want to show something in its entirety, but maybe not as often as you might think. Really consider like playing with different angles, with different distances. These things are small, but they can make a really big difference. For example, in here, I was giving, I wanted to show, an occasion where maybe you're trying to take in this large area. Let's say maybe you have a group that you need to take a photo of, or you're at an event and you're filming and you're trying to get as many people in the shot as you can, like they're mingling and having conversations. Sometimes that works, but a lot of times it just, your eye doesn't know where to go. It doesn't know that much about what's going on. Let's just watch that again. Like I'm intrigued about what this is, but I don't learn anything more. And another thing to notice is that when you use, this was on my phone, it was the half setting. So it like makes it wider angle. Wide angle will distort anything on the sides. And so this woman looks really stretched out. And over here, you can see this looks very strange. when you're filming people in particular, it's really something to avoid because they're just going to look very bizarre. Um, and sorry, keep finding. Also, I feel like it's often people's faces that you really want to see. So just be mindful that there might be times when you really need to see the whole shot, but maybe you use it for part of the time and then you zoom in on something or vice versa. So if
Yeah,
you,
I've got a question
oh,
actually.
yeah, please.
If you don't mind going back on that other one.
No, let
Um,
me see if I can figure that
yeah, there we
out.
go. Yeah, this is something I see a lot with like my clients with nonprofit consulting. They have, a whole like village of students that they're supporting and they want to capture, all of them with, their packages that they got or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've seen one, the blurriness and the lighting, so that was really good. But two, is it better for them just to take a video of it versus a photo of it? Um, like what would be in that instance, like what would be your recommendation of how to capture, a bunch of people at once?
Yeah, probably some of both. I mean, there might be times when you need a photo, like for a report or something that, video wouldn't work for. Um, but with photos too, I would say try to vary the distances. And one thing I'll say is that if you're shooting with your phone, unless you know you have a very good phone, that will shoot in a really big, like a high resolution, don't count on being able to zoom in to focus on someone after, while you're taking it or after. So if you want to get close up to someone, get close up to someone. It's just going to be a much better shot. And I would say with video, what you can do is you can set the scene by showing the whole thing, maybe for a few seconds, but then you could go in closer to some people if you wanted to, really um like you don't want to stay way back and without knowing sort of who you're looking at for a long time. But it can be a great way to establish what you're seeing as a whole. And then you move in, or you could pan across. Um, so I feel like if you start looking at videos of anything that you think are well done, almost certainly you'll notice that the shots change a lot. Um, and we're so used to seeing it that we probably just don't really, it doesn't register, but they might go from like a close up of someone to a large, you know, distant shot. Um, does that make sense? Is that
Yeah,
answering?
I think that's helpful because like you're saying, I think the goal is something that people often forget when they're shooting video, for example, because we want to feel connected to the story and the narrative that people are, making a difference and like helping real lives. Um, and instead of just like, here it is, well, like here it is, and also let's get a close up of, what's actually happening. So it's not just a really random wide shot video of kids jumping in the air. That's cute, but also
Yeah.
like does that communicate impact? So yeah, I think, maybe something for people to think about is, what is the goal with the video? What's the purpose behind it? That's kind of what I'm picking up on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially because this is a nonprofit group that you have here, I'm trying to think about nonprofit occasions as much as I can. But I know it's something that I've actually struggled with, especially doing event photography, like for organizations I worked for. Um, this might be something that your folks will come across a lot themselves, is being part of the organization. I was very timid about getting close to people, just getting right in there and taking a photograph. But I noticed that when we would hire professionals, they did that all the time. And it made such just much more interesting photographs. So there's a dynamism that you get when you showing a big shot is great sometimes. You really want it, but a lot of times, yeah, you want to feel. And this next, trying to figure out where it's
So
um oh
question here.
oh yeah, go ahead.
So the video here, it's a still like a you are still, right? What
I was
happens if
still.
you move around at a slow speed?
You absolutely can do that, and that's what I was mentioning about panning. One thing I will say is that it is really difficult to do. So practice it, because when you see professional videos where they're moving and following a subject, they're using a gimbal almost certainly, which is something that stabilizes the camera. Um, you will be amazed, like if you're trying to walk while you're holding, you're going to see all these bounces. Um, and if you're not used to like walking around someone, for example, the same thing will happen. So practice it if you want to do that, or get there are very small, cheap gimbals that you can get for a phone, and it will help a lot. But then practice. And I'm just realizing I also hadn't mentioned that think also in a lot of, I think, video is also thinking in advance, like Melissa was saying, not just about, well, about how you're using it in a variety of ways. So also, are you going to be mostly showing this in Instagram stories, or is this going to be on YouTube? Because for Instagram stories, you probably want a vertical orientation. For YouTube, you want horizontal, like I think everything I've shot is horizontal, and horizontal is by far the more common way to shoot. But all the time I've had to edit videos where someone had shot vertically, and it's very difficult to make it work. Did that, Shaker, did that answer your question enough or at
Yes,
all?
yes, it's all good.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so we've talked about the wide and distant shot. Now here's a solution, is to really try to get in there. And I feel that when I'm going to play that again, I feel sort of instantly drawn to her hands and her face. And I did just a little bit of getting closer, and you kind of like, it feels like there's a story here all of a sudden in my mind. Like, what is she going to do next? Who is this person? So this is where I think, yes, do your wide angle that you need sometimes, but also really try to get in. Um, and so we can get to know someone a little bit. And also another advantage of not doing the wide angle, you'll see here, there's really no distortion, or maybe a tiny bit on the edges, which is helpful. Um, think, okay, so I'm going to talk about some more ways to add interest. And again, just interrupt me when you want. So here's a way you could, reflections are great. You just have to use them wisely. So you want to, maybe film a person, but you don't want just a standard looking at them kind of shot. You could use a reflection. It can be really effective. You wouldn't use this in every case for sure, but it could be a cool way just to have a different view. This could be a really nice way, like let's say you had a bunch of kids opening packages, maybe one shot is in a window, a reflection of them, and it just adds like a sort of energy that can be interesting. Perspective. And in this case, I mean, how you view. I'm sorry, I have to keep moving this thing around. Um, Here, if I had just shot these guys, might have been fun, but I think it's more fun when you see it through the sculpture. And there are a lot of times where you're around something, you just haven't thought of shooting through it, but that can be a really cool and easy way to um, see something a little bit differently. I'm going to keep talking, but any questions? Okay. Um, Another really easy way to add some interest is to remember that everything doesn't have to be at your eye height all the time. Um, and, so you could get down a little bit and shoot from another level. Here, I think this has a different feel. It's slightly looking up at the women, than if I were, just sort of shooting right at their eye level. One thing, and also to remember that, like, I'm 5'2", and I've worked with a photographer who was like 6'5". I think he was really tall. Naturally, we had totally different levels that we were shooting from. So it can be a really cool way to vary, is just to try to find ways to get down or get up sometimes. Like maybe there's an occasion where you're getting up on a table to shoot down because it's going to give you a really cool shot. Um, and along with that, something to keep in mind if you're shooting people, there are times when shooting from below up at them can be extremely cool. It kind of makes people look sort of more powerful or more intimidating. It depends what you're going for or something. But also, if they're older, like I am, it's like showing as many chins as possible. So just be mindful of not, making your audience, I mean, your subject look terrible. And on the opposite side, if you're shooting from above, it tends to have the effect of making someone seem smaller, maybe less powerful. So these can be used to great effect, but also just know that it might have that effect whether you meant it or not. Okay, I thought it would be fun to take a couple minutes here and just do a demo of how I guess I have to get out of there, of how I would approach editing a video. This is a really quick, and this is I'm just using my phone's editing tools. It's not any kind of special software. So this is basically universal, because what I want to show you is that there could be a few small things that make a big difference. So I took this outside yesterday. Oops, I did not mean to pass it on. Okay. Um, I don't know. I'm curious. What does it say anything to you guys just looking at that so far? It doesn't have to. I'm just kind of interested.
Well, it is again, the angle is capturing everything all about the store. So you stood far behind and you try to
Mhm.
get as much as you can, right?
Yeah. Does that, do you find it interesting, confusing, whatever?
No, it's to me it's very interesting in a sense that I can see whole glass,
Hmm.
whole reflection, like a feels like a more in the downtown kind of thing.
Yeah. And I like
Um,
that about it too. I'm sorry. Were you going to say more?
yeah, it gives me a lot more like it's in the happening place rather than just an isolated place.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, and I did try to choose something that would look interesting, but I'm going to try to make it even more interesting. Um, the first thing that I kind of noticed when I'm just going through this, I'm going to scrub through this. That's what it's called. I see this man entering on the left, and I kept him in there on purpose, but um, I think I'm going to crop that out, because it's one thing when there's a person's face here and you can't really see it. I think that's okay. But when there's, especially if you're doing this for your business or your organization, On the whole, it's better not to use, people that could be identified without having asked their permission. So I'm just taking him out of that. I'm not saying this is the end of the world if he shows up, but that's what catches my eye. I also think I like that there's a wide angle, but I'm going to crop it a little bit because I actually don't want to see the store next to it. And over here, I cannot help but notice that, and it really bugs me. Um, and again, a lot of this is seriously just your own preference. But in my mind, this has become a more dynamic shot. You might not agree, but that's how I see it. I'm going to now just adjust. I'm going to do a little bit of showing you how you can adjust sort of brightness and colors to bring out certain qualities. And actually, this editing thing is very nice because it kind of shows you like ways to just instantly make it darker, but that looks very strange, to make it lighter, and that looks to me a little too light. One thing in a class I had taken that I was taught is to try to make your edits just make it look natural. Because when you take a photo or you take a video, actually, it's rarely capturing what it really looks like in real life. You may have noticed this. So you sort of adjust it back so that it does, unless you're going for a particular effect. So here I could play with the exposure because I'm in a somewhat darker place. I can now see better and it feels more bright. And I'm sort of noticing the time. So I realizing I'm going a little over. So here are just some very quick things I can do. Also, warmth is something that often it might be on the cooler side. And I want you to, next time you're watching a movie or like the home edit, there's like before and after shots of things. In the before photos, it always has a sort of coolness. And in the after, there's always a sort of warmth. If you add a little bit of warmth, it can kind of make it glow and feel happier. There are other little things you can do, like add some definition, sharpen, so that details come out a little bit more. So now we have,
I got to
okay, yep.
I got to drop up, but this is interesting.
Thank you
Okay.
so much for
Yeah,
Yeah,
coming.
thanks for joining.
yeah. Like, bye.
Goodbye. And I think, okay, so I'm just going to say that's done. Yep. I think that was that. And I think all I had left was, oh, here's my website. Melissa has the information if you're interested in working with me or just learning more. And there's my dog.
Your dog is so cute. I do have a couple more questions,
Great.
Hannah.
Yeah.
So let's say I want to be like an influencer on Instagram. I know I've heard of things like presets that kind of, from my knowledge, like edit the warmth and things like that for you. But like, what do you think about presets? What are some things in mind in general for somebody who's leveraging Instagram as a platform, whether that's as an influencer, as a nonprofit, um, as somebody just sharing their life, even,
Yeah.
like their kids and their family and all of that.
Yeah.
Maybe like top one or two tips.
Yeah. Let me, I'll take an unedited version of that same clip. And we can just look at filters. And of course, and there are so many platforms and so many different tools. They're going to be different ones. But like here are filters, for instance. Sometimes this will do a ton just by choosing one that works for you. So if we look at vivid, you can see it changed the highlights and the shadows a bit. Vivid warm adds a lot of red, actually, I think. Cool changes. So like you can look at these and just kind of have fun with it also. depending again on the tool and the platform, there could be a lot more presets. I feel like it's a tough one in a way to answer quickly or globally, just because it really depends what you're aiming at. And so again, so much of this comes down to kind of thinking about what's your mission? What are you trying to do when you communicate? Are you trying to get more donors? Are you trying to get more program participants? Are you, whatever it might be? Or if it's personal, is this just to share with friends and you want to have a lot of fun? Like, I think that will determine a lot. And of course, if you're an organization that's like running circus programs for kids, or you're one that's, I don't know, like financing businesses in rural China, you're probably going to have extremely different mission statements, looks, that you want to, like sort of the tone, the seriousness or not. So it's a very brief answer, I know, but it's hard to.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then, like one thing I tell my clients too that, I probably should tell them more. So this is helpful for me as like a consultant too, but is like, from a marketing standpoint, like how do you want people to feel when they're looking at things?
Yeah.
Using that as like a gut, okay, like I want to feel warm, I want it to feel inviting, I want it to feel like they're a part of this movement. Um, so I think, yeah, presets can kind of do that. Even I noticed in myself, like, oh, this one's calming to me. Or like, oh, this is like intriguing, and different
Yeah,
emotions that it evokes even.
exactly. Yeah, that's I think that's why, as painful as they can be to do those, like ideal client profile or, these kinds of things can be really helpful because, you can't be everything and you can't appeal to everyone. Um, but if you do a good job of being pretty consistent, with how you are communicating, you will most likely attract the people that you do want to attract. So
Yeah.
there are situations in which I would totally use this filter, and then there are other ones where it would be wrong. So, um, yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you. This was really fun.